and welcome back to Getting to the Top, where I interview transformational leaders about their leadership journey in hopes of inspiring you on your leadership journey and getting more diverse candidates to pursue leadership at the highest levels. Today, I have the great excitement of interviewing Cathe Reams. She serves as a strategist and program manager responsible for designing, managing, and measuring an integrated communications program and supporting campaigns to raise awareness and engagement on Siemens' sustainability agenda. And environmental goals. She drives the overall corporate brand and reputation in the U.S. and develops communication strategies to demonstrate the company's leadership in sustainability. And that is huge because they are doing so much. She works to highlight the status of Siemens' achievement of net zero commitments and milestones, as well as Siemens' innovation agenda and the role of technology in achieving climate reduction targets for its customers. She serves as a communications business partner to the U.S. Sustainability Officer, providing strategic counsel and support, as well as managing an executive visibility program for the CSO and U.S. Sustainability team. She is a seasoned communications professional, as you will learn. She's worked in all facets of the communications profession, from advertising to online, across myriad industries, and from entertainment to grocery to real estate to technology. And when she's not hard at work, she serves on the board of directors for Rainbow Village, a transitional housing community, and is active in her church and dotes on her 5 beloved godchildren. I love that. I love that. All of it. All of it. I think it's so inspirational. So, Cathe, is there anything that I left out, I missed, or anything else that you'd want to add?
I don't have anything else to add, Racquel. I think we're going to dig right into it. I just want to say thank you for inviting me. I wish there had been things like this for me when I started out a few years ago.
Just a couple of days.
Just ago. A couple of days. That's why you call it season.
So tell me, where did you start out? What did you think? What was the first job that you had in your mind? What did you think you were going to do?
Yeah, honestly, I am a bit of an odd duck, Racquel. I always wanted to be in advertising.
Really?
Really. I was one of those that saw the movies. I'll tell you exactly the movie I saw. The movie was Kramer versus Kramer. And Dustin Hoffman was looking through a loop at photos, and it looked so important. And what he was doing seemed so magical. And I knew I was on the path. That's what I was going to do. I was going to be in a big city, in an advertising agency, in a fancy apartment with a loop looking at pictures and making big decisions, just like that. So I studied communications. I majored in business at the advice of one of my advisors, who said communications is great, but you need to understand business to communicate. And upon graduation, cut my teeth at a little tiny ad agency in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Started at the front desk, signing in the FedEx packages and the faxes. That dates me, but doing that kind of work. And I went from there to being a very, very junior media buyer. And again, dating myself, but back in the day before they had the software, and you actually received a massive rating book, and you calculated the ratings for radio, for television, and then you made the buying. I did not make the buying. I did the math on the back end. I was pretty junior then. But from that position, I had the opportunity to sit and listen and learn. I learned a big lesson at that point. You can choose to move paper, or you can choose to read every piece of paper you're told to move. And that gave me a chance to kind of get my fingers into understanding client service and realizing that that's where I really wanted to be in the agency business. And it took a couple of years to get into that type of role, account service. But once I got into that and had direct contact with the clients and could work side by side with people who are developing strategy, I knew I was on the right path.
That is, so how old were you when you saw the movie, without hoping not to establish too much of a timeline?
I graduated in 87, so we can do the math. So it must have been while I was in college, I'm guessing. I think that's when that came out. It must have been. I must have still, because I'm pretty sure I was already at school. I'll have to go back and do the math on that one. But I was convinced that that was really that was it didn't look like that. I don't know if that might surprise you, Racquel. It didn't look anything like that. There was no
Uh-huh.
loops, none of that fancy stuff was on my side. It was a lot of number two pencils and math, but it was still the encoding and decoding was still part of that role, understanding what it is your client needs, figuring out how to get that information to them, get their information they want out to their shareholders and their stakeholders. It was still that. It didn't look anything like the fancy I saw in the movies, but the magic was still there, and that's and honestly, like I said, I set out to do that. I've always stayed in some capacity in client service ever since.
And I love the idea of you could choose to move paper or you could choose to read the paper and understand the business and the difference that that would have made in terms of your effectiveness.
Racquel, a million years ago, you filed things and people
Mhm.
left. And when you were very junior, people left giant stacks of things on your desk because they didn't want to do that administrative stuff. And it would have been
Yeah.
really easy to just put the items in the file cabinet. And I did for about a week. And then I realized that's going to get really boring really fast. So I just started opening the folders and just reading them. And what the folders are project folders. The folders were assignments from the clients. They included briefings by these account managers that worked at the agency that they had to put in writing exactly what they were trying to accomplish, because that briefing folder was then handed off to the creative department, who then had to develop the assets that would do that. So, to put all that information down on typically just on one side of an 8.5 by 11-inch piece of paper was just fascinating. And so I was able to connect the dot between this folder and what was in it and what was coming out of the creative department. And then of course the folder also has all the back ends, the backs and forths, and why the client liked it or didn't like it, and what were the missteps, and what did we, and that was just fascinating to me. And so I just read it all, and I learned not only read the paper, but once you've read it, then you've got a real reason to ask the question, right? Hey, I read
Mm.
these two pieces. What was the difference? They seem to really like this one versus that one. And, you know, folks love to talk about what they do. They really do. And listen to me. They really love to talk about what they do. And I think for the most part, folks want you to learn. And if you take
Yeah.
that initiative and you come to the table and say, and this project looked like it went a lot easier than this one did. The folder's half the size.
Yeah.
So what gives? And I just had that chance, and it was a good lever and a good way to negotiate getting into a conversation, because I was very junior. I was in a little box down the hall doing math, and all the other folks were really closer to the boardroom and doing the real work. But it came down to folders and reading, and that opportunity is available to everyone still today.
Yeah.
So,
No, I hear that that is such a common thread. I mean, I think if I were to think about the most common thread that I hear in successful women, it is that curiosity and being, not necessarily saying, oh, I'm going to go do this thing for this purpose, but I'm curious about this aspect of the business. I'm asking questions. I'm demonstrating value just by being curious about what the work is about.
agreed. I couldn't agree more, Racquel. And it's a um, opportunity to be a little humble, because by being curious and learning this, you realize just how much you don't know.
Yeah.
You figure out pretty quickly there's entire phraseology, there's words you've never heard used. The words are all used in different contexts, right? There's processes and there's procedures, and there's a reason why all that exists. Because when you get out of school or when you're just getting started, it's pretty easy to think, oh, I can just jump right into that. Well, there's a reason that person is 10 years your senior and is where they are. There may be other reasons too, but for the vast majority of folks, particularly women, have worked really hard to get where they are.
Yeah.
And I've learned that by expressing my interest, and then also putting in that time to listen and learn, then the door tends to swing pretty wide open to have you listen and learn, sometimes in the room, not waiting for the folder, right? That's just kind of earning that opportunity to be in that room and hear the conversations in real time, go and shadow the appointments, etc.
I love that. And I think too, that creating that sense of wonder around your work makes it more interesting for you, but you can also use that sense of wonder to ask questions that they may or may not know the answers to. And if they don't know the answers to, then you are almost serving as a source of inspiration or a source of, wait a minute, here's a light bulb. Here's something I didn't think about. Why did that one go easier than the other one? Why is this folder twice the size of the other one?
Right. I think you're right about that. It's because you are coming at it out of the trenches, right?
Yeah.
And I think we all have a tendency to be head down quite a bit, and it's hard to get your head up. I find myself in that position quite a bit. And when somebody does come in and, kind of lift your head up a little bit, whether they be new in their career or maybe just new to your company, they
Yeah.
ask that magic question, which I think everybody gets about 90 days to ask. So why do you do it this way?
Yeah.
And in the back of your brain, before it even comes out, is typically, we've always done it this way. And as that starts bubbling up, you think to yourself, I can't believe this is coming out of my mouth. I've got to stop
Exactly.
and go, what do you see? What are you seeing that maybe I'm not seeing because I have been sitting here for a while? You're coming in from outside. Tell me what you see. And I see that more now in my role now. I see it with junior folks for sure,
Mhm.
but I also see it from anyone who joins our organization right out of the gate. Within about 60 days, they ask that question. So why? And then I tend to answer with, why are you asking? What do you see?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, I
then
think that's
if you
great.
see, shine the light.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. But I was surprised that you came in and you were at front desk and then you went into being a junior media buyer. And I appreciate that you put junior in front of media buyer, but that's still a pretty significant role. I mean, people work for years to get into a junior media buyer role. So how did you get noticed to be able to get into that role so early in your career?
So my initial role was in an administrative role, an administrative to an administrative person, supporting that individual. Um, I was probably just a pleasant pest, maybe. I just asked well, first of all, that department was right next to my desk, so I could hear them
Mhm.
all the time. I could hear them chatting. It
Mm.
wasn't a stretch for me to roll my chair over in between signing for FedEx packages, answering the phone. I had a lot of reasons to roll my chair in and listen, get to know them, occasionally befriend. Is there anything I can do to help? Anything small? Would it help
Mm.
you if I just ran the errand for you? I know these sound like really silly things, but sometimes one way to get in the door is by endearing yourself. If I can be the person that just is the path of least resistance, I'm helping
Mm.
move things along faster. And what happened was they just said, roll your chair in. Why don't you move your chair in over here? All the stuff you're doing out there, you can do back here with us. And then, like a lot of things, eventually a position opened up. It was junior media buyer. Did mean you sat in a cube all day and did math all day. You didn't talk on the phone, but I did sit next to a lot of other people who were on the phone,
Okay.
and I did get to sit in the meetings, right? And that's where you ask the questions and you just be really humble. And I still try to practice all of that today. Everything I've done in my career, vast majority of my growth has been from just raising my hand and
Mm.
offering to help, offering to be do a side hustle. Hey, I can take some of this on. I'm free on Saturdays. I'd love to help, and quite candidly, kind of wiggle my way in.
Yeah. So tell us then, how did you grow from that role into the next role?
So I stayed with that agency for quite some time. I actually stayed with the agency for 10 years. And
Wow.
yes, I stayed, or just under 10 years. And then again, dating myself, this thing called the internet was happening. Yes. Believe it or not, at that time, you couldn't just Google and find a restaurant nearby. And so there was a company called City Search that was a startup from Pasadena, starting a city guide in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I jumped out of this very safe, quote unquote, job with health benefits and all of this other stuff that come along with a safe corporate job. And I joined a startup that was in a room with desks, as you know, the doors were made out of just desks from Home Depot. And they had this vision for making the internet something everybody could use on just a regular day. And that was not something we could do. We were unplugging our phones and plugging them into our computers back then. And so I was just captivated by the idea of not just working on a brand, but building a brand.
Yeah.
And to be around people who were doing that. That was just not something I had seen. We were working with existing clients.
Yeah.
Incredibly fulfilling. But the idea of being on the ground level with people who had a vision for what was going to happen and how to create this brand and to be part of that was just too captivating. So I just took this leap. And I'm not one of those people that made millions. Just want to clear the air on that. I'm not one of those people, but I did take the leap. Tried to drive very carefully for about 6 months until they provided benefits. Honestly, had a chance to work with just some of the brightest people, brightest minds I'd ever experienced. I'd never worked for a technology company. I didn't even really understand what the internet was. I'm not going to lie. I didn't have access at home. And so I just jumped in it. What I did understand was what branding was. I did understand how to equate branding to business. I took that with me. I hung on for dear life and, joined this organization and learned the business side of business. And I was with them for quite some time, with them for about 6 years, rode the wave, rode the high highs, rode the low lows, and eventually made my exit when they consolidated to California. And I decided I was still a really Eastern girl, and I stuck it out here and moved back into the agency business. But what I got from that time, I've carried with me: the entrepreneurialism, the resourcefulness, the build the plan while you're working the plan.
Oh, wow. Build a car while you're driving it.
Got to keep them going. You got to keep putting those numbers on the board as fast as you can while you're building the strategy, because there was no time. And that sometimes just endurance, it will beat out almost everything. Can you stay up later? Can you get up earlier? Because they're in some instances, if you're that one still standing, you're the one that's going to get the chance to make the pitch, to do the work. So I got a lot of that from that position.
So, at that time, you take this chance, you make this enormous leap with this internet thing. And a lot of people, it's so like secondhand now. I remember those days where people were like, oh my God, that's not going to last. Put your credit card on the internet, Amazon. Oh, that's going to fail miserably. I was one of the people who was like, yeah, I'm not putting my credit card online. Are you crazy? What madness? And so, that would have been a significant risk for you at that time. Were you still living at home? Were you like, well, if it fails, I have a fallback plan. What were you thinking?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I have a great family. So I know that if I couldn't make rent, I probably could ask.
Okay.
But I didn't have, I'm lucky. I do have that. I didn't ask. I knew I could, I'm sure I can make rent. I was going to make rent. The health benefits were a little scary, but I did have a 6-month plan to get on benefits. But honestly, how often, I could go back to the job I have. Maybe not the same company, obviously, but I already had experience. I could get another job and go back to what I was doing. But when do you have that opportunity to take that leap? And I just felt like I had to do it. Honestly, I know since then I've met people who have taken incredibly bold leaps, changed their careers. I mean, I know people have gone back to school and started over, decided not to be a teacher, became a nurse. I can't even fathom that. Completely changing their career trajectory. I've got a friend right now who's been a stay-at-home mom for years, and she's back out there doing it, back in the workforce. Kids from middle school, she's back on the street again. I think that's a massive risk, right? After all those years and all that comfort, and now you're going to put yourself out there again. I thought she was bananas. So I think the leap looked one way for me. It was a technology leap. It was a media leap, right? It was in my career path, but I think I think in your gut if this is going to be your opportunity for growth, personal growth, professional growth. I think that. And if you got up and you got to make rent, but if you can make rent, you can eat, you can still just eat popcorn and get by until they change the pay scale.
I love that answer. I could not have picked a more perfect answer, because I think for so many women, we're not willing to take the risk, and men just throw, caution to the wind and take chances, and it works out. And it is about endurance. Can you sort of stay in it until you make it? And I think that willingness, especially early in your career, to take a risk on something that seems new or burgeoning, worst case scenario, you will learn something. You will
Yep.
learn from that experience, even if that industry fails or even if that company fails. And I know that it causes an anxiety. I mean, I've talked to enough young people who are at that stage in their career where they're like, oh my gosh. And as you get older, it gets more difficult because you have more to lose. But I feel like the people that I know who have been willing to just take that leap have had such extraordinary results or learnings as a result of taking that leap.
I would agree with Racquel. I would also say that the one thing that I did do on the back end, and I would always suggest this, is that when you do take that leap, let's say you take a leap like I did, leaving a very traditional environment and then jumping into a non-traditional at the time environment. I kept nurturing those relationships that I'd made. I didn't throw away all those relationships at the other agencies that, I'd had 8 years of a network that I had been building and cultivating. Trust me, I kept those wide open because I was pretty sure this thing over here I wasn't really sure it was going to make it either, right? And so I kept those lines open, kept those lines of communications open. I'm not going to lie, I also looked at just to keep what's happening on those jobs, just in case. But I was fortunate. So no matter what step you take, nurturing that network, those relationships is critical at every juncture.
Oh my gosh. And as a result of the internet, the world is so much smaller now. Everybody's so well connected. And so, not only is it good in the event that you require a fallback plan to nurture the relationships that you have, but it is guaranteed that somebody knows somebody that you've known. And so you cannot. Whereas, let's say 20, 30 years ago, you could get away with burning a bridge. You cannot do that now. And so it's so important. Oh my gosh, that's phenomenal advice. Listen, don't burn a bridge. Avoid it at all costs. Don't do it. It's not worth it. Even if you decide, listen, this isn't somebody that I want to maintain a relationship with for whatever reasons. I've done business with people who I've felt were unethical. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do business with you anymore. But I don't have to provide a long speech or tell you off. I just have to know, I know how I feel. And I'll move on. But that's so great. You're taking a chance, you're taking this leap. You're like, worst case scenario, if I need to engage the fallback plan and say, Mom, Dad, I need money for rent. But you nurtured the relationships that you had, and that network would stay with you.
Yep, I agree. And eventually I did go back into I'd say the more traditional environment, went back to the agency business when the .com, we all heard about the bubble, when the bubble burst, and the changes that had to be made in order to make the business soluble. It just didn't make any sense. I wasn't going to uproot from and move to, cross country for something that was still at the time pretty shaky. I stayed put. And because those relationships, I didn't go work at any of those agencies, but I used those relationships to get myself back in the agency business and continued jumping back and forth between agencies and the corporate environment since then.
Brilliant. So how did you land with Siemens? Because Siemens is a pretty big deal.
Honestly, it was another leap. I know that doesn't sound like it should be a leap. It's Siemens. It's a big company, but I've never worked anything even close to the size of what Siemens is. The largest company I worked for at the time was Ticketmaster, and at the moment, and that was, I don't know, 900 people or something like that. It was just nothing compared to what Siemens was. I joined Siemens. There were almost 500,000 people working at Siemens in 190 countries. I've been there for 18 years. I can't even believe it, Racquel, 18 years. And when I joined it, I honestly thought this is going to be my chance to get the big company, check that box.
Sure.
And I'll learn how to kind of wade through big company stuff, matrix stuff, the things I always read about.
Yeah.
And then I got inside and I realized this is like moving to a new city. There are
Yeah.
so many places to explore.
Yeah.
Places are departments, the places are projects, the places are functions, they're businesses. And when I put on that, it's a city, I'm going to explore every nook and cranny and see where I can apply my experience. That's really where my head's been at the whole time. Is not I do this job. It's I live in this city called Siemens. It's big, but what's the next part of the city I want to explore? Is it this business that's on that I don't know is making electric vehicle charging? Is it this function? Gosh, I've never worked with the HR organization. I'm a communications person, Racquel. I have a craft and I work that craft and I support businesses in their needs. And so whether it be human resources or whether it be selling the products and solutions, I feel like I can probably find a way to do that anywhere in either capacity. But I think it was putting that getting my head on straight and not being intimidated by the size because it was overwhelming. The language was different and it was massive. And the corporate directory, if you typed in my last name Reams, there were hundreds of them. It's just hundreds of people with my last. Oh my goodness, I'm I'm not only really a small number. I'm a small number in my own last name. It was just the sheer size, and so I kind of had to take a deep breath and go, wait a minute, I got to look at this. This is not. I can figure out a way to make my mark. And so I really try to think about. I've moved several times in my life, but a little bit of background. I was a military kid. We moved many, many, many times, 14 times by the time I graduated from high school. So
Wow.
I was pretty good at kind of sizing up, I'll say it, the lunchroom, pretty good at sizing up the lunchroom. And I kind of just put on I got to size up the lunchroom hat. If I'm going to make my mark, there's the lunchroom is its own city. We all know that from school. There's all kinds of different people in all kinds of different places. How do I make my mark there? And so I just kind of breaking Siemens down into something that I could get my head wrapped around, which is a city or a lunchroom. Then it was just a matter of going, all right, I can navigate this. Let me figure out how to meet folks, apply my craft. And 18 years later, I'm in the role that I'm in now. But I've had 7 positions formally on paper, lots of things attached to those, but 7 positions in 18 years.
Wow. So how, I know that you're breaking it down, it's a city and you're approaching it that way, but how do you not get lost in this city? How do you not feel like a number in such a massive organization?
It is. It is. It is. And sometimes it's complicated and you think you're never going to get an idea across the fence because there's yet another person that has to look at it, or another person has to look at it, or there's 6 steps to process an invoice. Sure, it has all of that. But what it also has is almost an endless pipeline of opportunity, an endless array of new projects and programs coming down, company acquisitions. The company itself evolves as the world's evolving.
Yeah.
We've gone from being a heavy automation hardware company to a software company from in many ways of looking at it now, with digitalization being just the driver of everything that we're doing. So yes, there is that the bigness and the massiveness that comes with that, but I just really try hard to set that aside because on the other side of that coin is all the opportunity that comes with the big. And I think it's easy to get swallowed up and it's too big. I'm just a number.
Yeah.
I just say, set that aside. Why can't you be number one? I mean, come on, find a way to make your mark and then build your city network inside that new city, which is this company. I maintain my external network. It is almost a full-time job to maintain your internal network with a company the size of Siemens. So you need to know that. You need to know you got to work it. You got to reach out to people. You got to think about who you haven't talked with in a while. You got to set up little timers. So there are a few skills that might feel more like external skills that you then have to apply to the internal environment because it is big. But with big comes, again, I'll just say it, with big comes lots and lots of opportunities that you might otherwise have to look outside for in a smaller organization.
Okay. I'm super, super curious as to how you worked your way up. And I love this idea of creating processes around your networking so that you are intentional about it and you're not sort of waiting on, okay, happenstance, I've run into somebody at a cooler, because you are at this moment at the cutting edge of what Siemens is about, which is incredible. But before we get there, I have to know, when you said 14 places, tell me some of your favorite places.
Hands down, my favorite place was this Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, southeastern Illinois. It was a very small military base, but what set that apart was that Air Force Base and the city next to it had a very good relationship. You weren't just the kids who lived on base. And I'll tell you a fundamental difference. We all know when you're going in middle school, high school, all the clubs make their decisions, all the teams are decided before you leave school in the summer, right? You try out for things, you sign up for things. They didn't do any of that until the fall. They allowed those kids to transfer in, right? They were very sad. I'd probably try to figure it out if there were some track stars that might come in or something like that, or football stars. They're probably doing it more for the athletics.
Yeah.
But it also allowed you to sign on to things. So you weren't the kids who walked in and then had to kind of ask to be added to, of all things, the yearbook committee or something. It was all brand new and starting on day one of school. So it was the one place where the town, the city had really made accommodations for this very transient community that came and went every couple of years. And so that was and the opposite was, where the opposite was true was, less fun, because you'd get there and have to navigate for a good, 3-4 weeks to figure out, is this a place you bring your lunch, or do you buy your lunch? Do you wear the polo shirt or the t-shirt? Do you stand by the lockers, or do you just drag yourself around all day? All those things, the social things you have to figure out. When I just got pretty good at doing it really fast.
So do you think that's what sort of built what clearly seems to me like your networking superpower, this need to adapt as a child from environment to environment, so that once you entered the working world, you had already done that at probably the scariest time of your life, having to create new networks really quickly, maintain old networks, and move on to newer networks when the move took place. Otherwise, you would drown because you're moving from place to place, and that's not something you have control over.
I didn't think about it at the time. As I've grown in my career, I definitely think that the adaptability and the resourcefulness that comes with that, the ability to read the room, I think all of that was I had the opportunity to grow those skills just in my life, from first grade on, right? So I don't think there's any doubt that that's definitely helped. It certainly gives me the confidence to walk in a room with a bunch of people I don't know. I don't tend to be the one that puts my hand out first. I'm still not that person that's I say hello, but I've also learned you got to spend a lot of time listening and watching that room and listen, to understand some of the nuances, right? Never assume anything. That room is very different than the last room you're in, than the other room that you're in. So I think that some of those skills definitely came with it, but also just I think inside knowing that I'm good enough. I'm going to figure this thing out. I think that came with it too. So walking in and not knowing anyone, being able to set aside the intimidation that comes with working for a gigantic company. I think all those things inside, I still understand. Look, I made it through 12 years of moving all those times. This is going to be easier than that. Anything's easier than being a seventh grader with two different seventh grade class, having to do that twice. Yeah. Trust me, everything's better than that.
No, that's true. So you are now working on, an area that Siemens is absolutely making a global mark. You are communicating around that. You are, on the what's next. You are on the team that's working on the future of Siemens. What is that like?
Well, I need you to be my publicist after saying all that, because it sounds fabulous. I'm going to take that recording and make a plaque or something out of that. It's exciting, and it's incredible. And it's exciting in so many ways, because I do work for a company that makes the stuff, right, that actually has the impact that we need to have on the planet.
Yeah.
Whether it be with the built environment, whether it be making our industry, our factories more efficient, whether it be we all know that the EV charging that has to happen, and the networks, and all of the energy it's going to take to run all those. We're doing all of that work, and it's extraordinary, and it gives me so much confidence knowing that I work for that company that's actually doing the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're really fortunate that not only do we do the work, we get to do the work in our own house, our own buildings, our own factories. But we work with extraordinary clients who are pushing us really hard, because they have their vision. They know what they want to do. They're the ones stretching. And so we have to keep figuring it out and innovating. So all of that is incredibly exciting. We all have to have things we have to set aside. And the thing I always have to set aside is when I am at that cocktail party and someone says, well, none of this is really going to matter. Or we're never really going to get there, or you're never going to be able to fight the oil companies. And so just some of that's out there. I have to learn to not get riled up. I have gotten pretty riled up. Might surprise you, Racquel. I've got pretty riled up in some meetings when they don't know, in some cocktail parties and some dinners where they're just spewing the misinformation that's out there.
Yeah.
I just always, my response is, and so many of my friends know what I do, that they'll tend to give me that look. And after someone says something that is obviously wrong, I just try to lean back into the things that I know are right, and the examples and the proof points that of what we're doing and the impact that we're having. And that, this race that we're on is real.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say that the people that I work with every day feel it. And I've never worked with people with such a sense of urgency. It's the same sense of urgency that I remembered from my city search days. That was urgency because they were going to democratize the web. They were creating something new that had never been done before. They needed to beat everybody to market.
Right.
This one is about making sure the world's really better.
Yeah.
And so it's a different thing on the inside, right? It's not all business. It really is. And that's incredibly exciting. But I'm not going to lie. It's frustrating when I hear on TV and I hear even people I know spew things that are incorrect.
Is it also a little bit scary because you understand what's at stake? I mean, having a seat in the front row of the solutions that are required, what all of us have to do, and the incredible weight of this race that we're in for this amazing future that we know is not just possible, but quite likely probable given the solutions that we already have at hand, but that it actually will take all of us sort of rowing in the same direction to get there. And the types of solutions that Siemens provides and the role that you have, are you sometimes daunted by the task at hand and the responsibility that you have to make sure that you're taking people along with you?
I used to feel that more when I first started in this space than I do now, because I really feel that it's so much more understood. Even if some of the data gets all mixed up sideways, and there's still the very loud, but as I am increasingly understanding, a very loud but very small group of folks out there that don't believe it anymore. When you turn on your evening news, which I don't know if anybody still does that, I do. You turn on your evening news, and within the first 5 minutes, the words climate change are used.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because of what's happened recently in Maui or because of the wildfires, but because of something else that's happening. It could be air quality. It could be anything. But the fact that those words are used before the first commercial break.
Yeah.
tells me that there is a much greater understanding and appreciation and a real desire by organizations that can reach the masses beyond what we do at Siemens, doing a really good job of
Yeah.
that. And we just also cannot discount the very large and very loud voice of the youth in our nation and world,
Yeah.
who are raising their hand, and not just raising their hand and pointing a finger and wagging a finger, but actually doing the hard work
Yeah.
and convening in meaningful ways. I think we get caught up in people who just wag a finger and scream and protest,
Yeah.
when the vast majority of folks out there are really trying to convene, again, in meaningful ways and have good dialogue and understand it. And I think that is also what continues to push us. So the folks that we hire at Siemens now are demanding it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're coming to work because they know what we can do, what they can do, and they're going to continue to push us.
All right. So my two last questions for you. One is, what kind of leader are you? And the second one is, what's the best advice that you've been given?
Okay. So I probably fall, we've all seen the leadership wheels. I think the wheel of all the, I probably fall pretty squarely in the servant leader category. I really do believe that if you can ensure the folks who are on your team, whether they're your direct reports, or in my instance, most of my career has been, I've been an individual contributor. I've not had direct reports most of my career, but I've truly believed that I am a leader because I've led teams. I've had to, bring around. I've had to encourage people to be part of my programs and my projects and to contribute their time and their talent. And the way you do that is by helping them understand how it's going to not only improve their visibility and their opportunities for career growth, but how their unique talents are going to make this program better. I think that skill, helping understand all of that, has probably kept me pretty squarely in the servant leader role. But I think it's also helped me just be a better colleague because, again, as an individual contributor, most of my teams are built by, I have to build them each time I have a new project. And these folks are my colleagues. The best advice, I've actually two pieces of advice I keep in mind every day, and I'm looking up at my board right now because I have them both written. One piece of advice I was given by my very first boss, and when I moved into client service, and he said, always try to delight their day. Delight their day. Think what are you doing to delight their day? And at the time when I first started, I was trying to think, I'm not really doing anything. How do I delight their day? I can't take them a chocolate. I can't, what am I going to do? And I realized it's simple things. Like when you send somebody something and it's already formatted so they can print. Right? Or, anything. What have I done to make something just a little bit more delightful? And I've always kept that in mind. And I think that makes you think a little bit differently about things. And then the second one is, this is advice my father has gave me and my father lives by. And I really think that this is probably what sticks with me most. And that's leave everything better than you found it. And I think that applies in every capacity, certainly personally. But if you are thinking about what you're working on, who you're working with, what situation you're in, if you try to think, how am I going to leave this better? Then you are inherently figuring out how you can leave your very unique mark on that situation, on that room, on that relationship, on that project. I mean, you can insert anything you want in there, but leaving it a little better than you found it does leave your fingerprints on it. And I think that hopefully will leave a lasting legacy for the work that you've done.
And what is the advice that you most commonly give to young people coming up in their careers?
I'm not going to lie. I used to light their day. I used to light their day all the time because it was what someone told me. And I think that that word delight is something pretty special. That's actually having a smile. That's being the bright spot in the day. That's saying yes when the task is crappy, right? That's raising your hand when nobody raises your hand. It's picking up the dirt, the dishes on the conference table at the end of the meeting, for Pete's sake, because you know some other woman's going to be stuck doing it. So, I mean, that little word, if you carry that every single day, have I done anything to delight their day? That's everybody you come in contact with. Come on. You're going to be invited on every project. You're going to be invited to be on every team.
Love it. Love it. Cathe, thank you so much for your great advice and for that insight into that career. I think it's marvelous the way that your curiosity allowed you to grow from role to role, the way that you embraced, changing your career and working with something that at the time was absolutely not proven and very risky, but understanding that this was the time that you wanted to learn something new and that you were willing to take that chance. And then getting into Siemens, which, it's such a global brand, such a huge organization, hundreds of people sharing your last name within the organization, and still being able not only to find a way to create your own space in that organization, but to thrive and now to be working on what is the cutting edge of what Siemens is about and creating something that's meaningful and future-proof and being a part of that. I think it's brilliant. Thank you so much. I know that if you stayed with us to this point, you learned a lot and you're inspired on your career journey. I love the idea about being intentional around building your network and making sure that especially if you are doing something risky, that you keep making these intentional, setting aside time, setting aside reminders to keep your network active, because you don't want to call on that network only when you need it. You want to have it there waiting for you and active, and they're like, oh yes, I hear from her all the time, versus I hear from her when she needs something. So thank you so much. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We are delighted to be sharing these inspirational leaders with you who are transforming our world every day. Thank you so much. And next time.
Thank you so much, Racquel. Have a great day.
Thanks.